On today's episode of I'm on the Clouds, I'm talking to Scott and Melissa from the band Lovesliescrushing. Forming around 1991 and releasing many albums on the Project Records label, they were one of the bands that when I was a teenager, I'd always ask myself, how the hell are these guys doing this? Recently, I was able to talk to them and discover a little bit how they've made their music through the years. Stay tuned. All right. Hey, guys. Thanks for joining me and doing the show today.
Hey, thank you for having us.
So I'm here with Scott and Melissa from Lovesliescrushing, and I got the Blow Eyelash Wish cassette and CD from Project Records. Probably, when did it come out? 94?
Yeah, 94, I think it actually came out.
Yeah, on Project.
I would have been 17, and I was a senior in high school. I remember that. At that time, I was one of the guys who was buying everything on Project at that time. They had like a good 5-year run where they kind of could do no wrong between Soul Whirling Somewhere, you guys, Lycia, did I say Soul Whirling Somewhere? Love Spirals Downwards? I don't remember. Anyway, but you guys were different in that there wasn't, I don't want to say goth because that's not the term. I don't know. You guys had more of a shoegaze thing, but there was no drums and bass. But you guys definitely were different in that there wasn't a super dark, depressing spin to it, I guess. Yeah. So how did the band come around? I guess my first question is: were you guys musicians before you heard shoegaze? And when I say shoegaze, I mean just anything dreamy. I'm just saying shoegaze for the sake of argument, okay? But were there gateway bands, and were you a musician beforehand, or did hearing this type of music make you go, okay, I want to buy a guitar?
As far as being a musician, so I always, played piano, took piano lessons. I played the French horn.
What age did you start?
I was probably, 8 years old when I started taking.
So you knew how to read music?
Piano lessons. So I knew how to read music. So I did the traditional,
right.
Complained about piano lessons, but did them, and then finally got to a point where I was happy that I had done them and was in band and that sort of thing. And I liked to sing, but I never ever considered myself a singer.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to lots of different kinds of music all through high school. So as far as doing the vocals for Lovesliescrushing, that was something that sort of just evolved.
It evolved organically.
It did, I wasn't looking for it. But it was interesting to me, and it ended up just sort of happening.
So she was trained as a musician and knew how to read music. I never learned how to read music or anything like that. I started probably around the same time you did, like probably younger than 8. My grandfather played guitar. My dad played trumpet. So I was always surrounded by people who made music. I mean, we're musicians. I lived above my grandparents, and they had an organ. So, I'm like 4 years old, going down there and turning the organ on, and nobody's around, just playing drums. I was doing that. I was like doing weird stuff like that because I didn't know how to play it, but I knew how to just get these really crazy, ominous, just making noises out of it. But I never really learned how to play properly until probably 7th grade. My mom bought me a bass. So I liked guitar, but I just felt like bass was a little bit easier. So she bought me a bass, and I just picked it up and just joined a band and just started playing bass. I guess, because I'd seen my grandpa play guitar, and I just felt really comfortable with it. And then I learned the names of the notes on the guitar and the bass. But yeah, I never really learned how to play. I just started doing.
So then you're musicians first. At what point are you hearing something, dreamy? I don't know if it's Cure, Cocteau Twins, Killing Joke, Joy Division, something.
The first dreamy thing I would have heard would have been Laurie Anderson's Superman. Oh, Superman. That would have been like the beginning. Oh, Superman. And then actually Eraserhead. The In Heaven.
Mm-hmm.
That In Heaven song was very like crazy. And then I went over to a friend's house and he played me The Pink Opaque by Cocktail Twins. But no, even before that though, I consider The Cure.
Yeah, I
The
listened
Cure
to The Cure,
is
Cocktail Twins,
yeah.
Joy Division. I was listening to all of those bands during
junior
high
year.
school.
Yeah, by sophomore year, I'd already heard of The Cure like a forest, stuff like that. So yeah, I would say sophomore year was all I was listening to was The Cure, like Faith and Pornography. 17 Seconds. Those were like the two major albums.
The trifecta. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, we were listening to all the bands that shoegaze bands were listening to at the time. Like Slow Dive was listening to Susan Evangelist and The Cure and Cow Twins and stuff like that. So all the bands that would become shoegaze bands in England were the same bands that we were listening to. So that's why a lot of American bands became Dreamy, because we were all had the same ingredients. So there are bands that they're post, I consider them post bands because they came out after Slow Dive and after Chapter House and after Ride. But we were in that same mix, but just on this side of the pond.
Yeah.
See what I'm saying? So it's like that's why we sound the way we sound, because we're coming from the same. We're just on a different side of the coin. Yeah, we had the same. It seems like we had the same.
A lot of the same influences.
As all those bands. But then bands that came out maybe in 95, 96 were like, yeah, I listened to Chapter House, and I listened to Ride. That's not what we were listening to.
But I think
we appreciated them. I loved Slow Dive because I recognized the same aesthetic that I was into, like this Mortal Coil.
And My Bloody Valentine.
And of course, My Bloody Valentine.
Because we listened to that album, Loveless, like
that was
over and
nonstop.
over and over and over and over again on a cassette.
Right. Yeah, I had it on cassette.
We'd only listen to it in the car.
Because that's the only place we had a cassette player.
I'm like, let's go for a drive and drive around and listen to that. We had like a Slow Dive tape that my friend had made. And I think we saw My Bloody Valentine play in Detroit before we had the tape.
And it was...
Yeah, so we really didn't know exactly what My Bloody Valentine sounded like.
No, I think we had been listening to them. Because I remember going to that show, and it was so loud.
It was so loud.
It was so loud and you almost couldn't hear it. It was so visceral. It was just like your whole body was just vibrating.
But I couldn't recognize the songs. I only knew 2 songs at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I knew I had to go there. It was an influential, impactful concert. What messes up a little bit is that our tape on Project and the CD came out like 94, 95. So it made it look like we had probably just started the year before. So there's that time discrepancy.
Right, but you guys started in 91?
Yeah. We started in 91, but by that time I'd already been doing music for a while.
Right.
So it was like we started proper in 91, but
I'd
already been doing stuff.
We were playing shows
in 91.
In 91, 92. We played a show in San Francisco, like
right after
2 weeks after Julian was born. And so that was 93. Yeah. So, and we'd been playing for a while.
So it looks like we're late to the game. Everyone been making music.
Well, you were
87 to
a lot of music.
I was making Dreamy stuff, but before I met Melissa.
When I first heard the Blow Eyelash Wish, like I said, it was different than Project. I remember me and my friends thinking, like, this is kind of different for Project. Okay.
Yeah. Sam was like, I don't know what this is. But he liked it, but he still didn't understand. And then he finally heard some shoegaze, and he was like, "Oh, I get it. I know what this is." Then it made sense to him.
So, was there ever any thought of putting drums and bass, or was it always just going to be soundscapes?
No, the songs had drums. Maybe some bass.
Some of them had.
Some of them,
drums.
yeah, a bunch of them had drums. I'd say like more than about 75% of the songs had drums.
But then we took them all out.
I still don't know what it was that made me decide to take out the drums and whatever bass there was.
I think though that
it just worked.
I think that part of it, and I think that
because Charlie had drums, like all these songs had drums.
They did.
We just left one song has a drum loop in it, Immaculate Song. Like that was it. Like it was almost like our closing. Like this is gonna be the last one, the only one that'll have drums, and that's it. Because it's like a heartbeat. It's like there's like a pulse in one of them. And I feel like there's ghost drums on Baby's Breath. Like we'd taken out, but it was still stuck on the tape, like bleed through. Sure. There's a drum bleed through.
There's a lot. There's rhythm. There's rhythm that occurs with the guitar and the voice too.
Yeah, there was enough of that.
Part of it, like for me, was the aesthetic too of like, because of what was going on, like with painting that I was seeing in painting with minimalism and sort of like getting down to like that kind of base layer, like uncovering sort of the essence, you know, of what is the music, and then maybe gradually adding back in layers. That was sort of my interest, and it just happened to work with what you were doing as well. I think that's why it worked when we started doing recordings together, because I saw the vocal as more of just another layer, whereas some vocalists, you know, they want to be front and center, like, you know,
right.
Because that's more typical.
There's two schools. If you're looking at it like painting, then there's foreground and background. But in most pop music, the singer is in the foreground.
Yep.
And music is just basically sonic wallpaper.
Right.
And we didn't believe that. We're like, no. Wallpaper, it's all just wallpaper then. That's what I feel like the shoegaze aesthetic is. It's like it's all hitting you all at once. There is nothing in the back. But even then, some shoegaze bands still push the vocals up front because they're still coming from that perspective. In our case, the very first songs that we did do didn't have drums in it. Like Valerian, there's no drums in that. So we did start off not having drums. When we did Blow Lush Wish, we got a drum machine. We're like, maybe we need to add drums to some of these songs. We did add drums to it. But then my philosophy about drums changed. I feel like drums, people weren't paying attention to drums at all, in the sense that you'd make your music and then you'd add drums to the song. And why? You know what I mean? People just did it, but they didn't ask why the drums were there. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they're just adding drums to the song because that's what you do. You have a song and you got the bass, you got the drums, the keyboards, whatever. And then, of course, you're just supposed to add drums, but you sonically need to justify why the drum is there. And I saw that tons of bands couldn't justify it. So it's like, well, I can't justify why the drums are in our songs. But in Your Eyes Immaculate, that song, the drum totally needs to be there because it has a tonal quality. It's specific. There is a time where I did have drums in one Lovesliescrushing song specifically. There's no guitars, it's just Melissa's voice, and it's tuned drum machine, so it's completely the philosophy. It's like the drums are going to be there, they're the song. It sounds like a music box. Or otherwise, you're just like wasting a track just because it's supposed to be there.
And we did a lot of like work around stretching things out and like sort of putting space in between things, which we would sometimes argue about.
Yeah.
But in the end, I do think it worked.
Were you tracking to click track? I mean, how were you? I mean, I know you only had 4 tracks, but you know, it wasn't just one guitar track, right? You had multiple. So was it just?
Yeah, there's multiple guitar tracks, but one guitar track would be the lead. So we're just playing to that. I record that. So I like record track 1, the lead guitar. I mean, the main guitar rhythm part, and then on the second track, I would do how I want it to sound, and then scrap that one rhythm track, and just do that a couple times. And then Melissa would sing, and she would do bouncing. She did a lot of bouncing on Zubatine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So there's
so there was no timing. There was no click other than the first track as a timing. Okay.
Right.
I would put headphones on and listen to the recording, to what you had recorded, and then I would just sing.
Yeah.
And I never let you listen.
She never let me listen.
But it was very, very organic.
I would have to leave because she would yell at me and tell me to leave.
I didn't,
because I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear her record it, but she's like, get out of here. I'm like, fine. Go leave. Get in the car and go to the store, get something, come back.
It was fun though, because it was like very like in the moment and sort of just responding. That's how I felt. I felt that was my role, is just to sort of respond to what you had recorded.
Yeah.
With the
and
guitars.
I would just leave it. I would never really say you needed to do anything.
No.
To it. I was
so
just
like, I never
That's
rehearsed. I never was
like,
I'm going to sing this and this and this. I would have words, so they were sort of very loose.
We had this little
poems.
book. We had the little book with some words in it.
and I would pick words, and I would make up these combinations of words that I liked how they sounded together. Sometimes they were sort of loose poems, but so I would have that. But even then, it was
Yeah, but it works like that though. A word salad type thing works as opposed to you like telling a story or something. I mean, you could almost just say almost like a vocal in if you know who Seafield are, where it's like you can just say a phrase and it doesn't have to mean anything. You know what I mean? It's more of the sound and the.
It was totally about the sound, and but then people say, well, what are you saying? What are what are your lyrics?
Slightly off topic, but I always was super impressed with the fact that you guys and like Sia and Michael from Soul Whirling Somewhere, that you guys were creating these albums on 4 tracks. The first time when we heard Blow Eyelash Wish, I remember me and the other guitarist in that band, we were like, dude, how is this guy doing this? It sounds like Loveless. Maybe not as polished, but as like he's getting these sounds on a 4 track, and it took like $200,000 or whatever for Kevin Shields to do, Loveless. And I remember we had these conversations like, what the hell? How does this guy even know what to do? Because there was no internet back then. We didn't know how to make those sounds or whatever. I mean, we had Boss and DoD pedals. We didn't know how to do anything else, but. Yeah. I read the interview with you where you said that, when you heard Loveless, you were like, oh, I know what that patch is, you know what I mean, from the MIDI verb or whatever. So was it something where you just happened to come across that patch and then you heard them and you're like, oh, I know that sound?
Yeah, okay, well, that rack mount came out in 87. So in 1987, like I switched and I started playing guitar. Like my friend was in this one cool band, this local band, and I bought his old guitar, so I started teaching myself how to play. And he had the Alesis MIDI Verb 2, which had just come out, and it had these, beautiful reverbs that, other people hadn't really heard before. When I heard him play through the MIDI Verb 2, I immediately knew how the Cocktail Twins had gotten their sound. I realized that reverb was a crucial element to getting it sound. So I was like, I gotta get one of those. So when I first heard MBV, it was probably 90. My friend had a tape that he let me borrow, and on that tape were 2 Isn't Anything songs. And the second I heard it, I was like, oh, it's like this dude's running guitar through that the MIDI Verb 2. Mm-hmm. So I instantly knew what it was. So yeah, it was a crucial element to get. So we did buy that.
Because I remember hearing you guys and going, well, what the hell? He figured it out. How did he figure it out? Because again, it wasn't being blasted around the world. You know what I mean?
But other people recognized it too. They're like, oh, he's got an SPX90, or he's got a MIDI Verb 2. Basically, I used what they used to make Loveless, but in the lowest rent version of it. Because they used like top of the line samplers.
But even though yours was a little harsher around the edges, I'm saying my group of friends, we appreciated there was a DIY aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't mean that insulting at all. It was like, okay, it's a little bit crustier, but I
wanted it to be DIY.
Right, but you could tell, like, wow, they're almost getting the same thing, but they're doing it in a different way. And I'm sure you appreciate and understand this too. I thrive with limitations, and I love using gear in ways that it's not intended for. Give me 2 synthesizers. You see the rooms where the guys have like 50 synthesizers behind them and stuff, and they're all sitting there like, hey, you're like, dude, how do you even decide how to do anything?
I totally agree with what you were saying about appreciating limits, because I think that applies to really everything, but especially like in creative endeavors. If you have limitations, like if you're a painter and you have a limited color palette, or you're a musician and you have limited equipment, it does push your boundaries, which as a creative person, I mean, that's really exciting. Like when you can
the problem alone
when you can
makes
when
you
have this
thinking.
You have this vision, and it's like, okay, how am I going to achieve this with what I have available to me? I think it just pushes you to be more creative. So
it's forcing
I
you.
agree.
So it's like
It
it's making your
does.
brain so much work extra
And
hard,
that's why I always
and
tell
that
people
helps
like
come up with different
It's
better ideas.
problem solving, and
it is.
there's an enjoyment in that alone, you know. And
Yes,
and a lot of
absolutely.
the bands that I like, my favorite albums of theirs were their first couple albums where they didn't have a lot of gear and they had to get creative. When
Yeah.
you're writing your songs, are you writing something and you're like, okay, this is for Star, this is for Astrobrite, this is for lovesliescrushing, or you go through a period of, okay, I'm specifically writing for this project and I'm just going to spend, you know, a chunk of time just working on that music for that? Or is it a case of you write a song and you're like, well, this is definitely sounding more like this project?
It comes out like after I do it, it sounds more like a particular band, so I just throw it in the bin for that band. So I'll find pieces of music that I don't even know where it came from. So I'm kind of worried. I'm like, did I record this? Don't have it. Like, I think it's mine, but it's just so. And when I come to it that way, it's like I know that it works.
Are you're not still using the 4-track, are you? Or you're using a DAW, or you're still using a 4-track?
Yeah. So I use the 4-track, and then I mix it into GarageBand just to edit it, just to get it out. And then I can also listen to it without having to listen to it on the 4-track.
But when you're using a 4-track now, are you still using that recording process, or are you tracking anything into the computer?
Well, I track it all on the computer.
So I write 90% of my songs just on this acoustic, and then track them, and then add effects to it. You know, distortions and fuzzes or whatever, I will record that into Pro Tools, add stuff in as plugins. And then there's like 10% where I find some kind of weird effect that the song was written around that effect from some sort of pedal or something. And then I track that into Pro Tools. I don't see you writing a bunch of stuff on acoustic, but I could be completely wrong. So is it you're messing around with pedals, coming up with your rack mount gear? That's what you're just tracking, and it is what it is. Okay.
Yeah, it goes to tape like that.
Is it ever a part where you're like, man, I put way too much reverb on this, or
There's never too much.
never enough?
Never, no,
Okay.
I'm totally fine with it sounding like a vacuum cleaner, which I actually think we sound more like a vacuum cleaner than any of the shoegaze bands that's out there. When you hear people like, they sound like a vacuum cleaner, I'm like, no, they don't. Have you heard maybe listen to a vacuum cleaner? That doesn't sound like that at all. But when I listen to some of our stuff, I'm like, well, I'm guilty as charged. You could. I'm totally fine just playing vacuum cleaner, do some reverb, and releasing that. Like, I would do that.
Have you released an album called Dyson yet?
No, I released Glitherine, and Glitherine sounds pretty much like a pretty vacuum cleaner.
That's a song right there, Pretty Vacuum Cleaner. Now, when I come up with something, I instantly start programming drums or whatever, and I record a verse and a chorus, and then I start editing and moving stuff around. It's almost like how like an electronic artist would. You know what I mean? I'm not playing start to finish through the song. It's all copied and pasted and edited and all that stuff. Is that something how you're doing it, or are you recording when you do a guitar track, you're hitting record and going all the way through?
Go all the way through. And then I, pick it apart afterwards. But, I lay down the groundwork first, the sketch, like the underpainting. Put the underpainting down, and then I go on and destroy it. So it doesn't resemble itself at the beginning. But that's usually what happens to a song. Record a song, and I'm like, this isn't going to be the song. So I learned to not fall in love with that. Even though I might like it, I'm like, wow, this is great. I'm like, in my way, I'm going to totally destroy this. And that's why, all of our songs sound like the way they did. They started off as one thing, and they get totally just run through the blender and chopped up into what you got.
Back when we were recording long distance, you would send me tracks, and then I would do the same. I would just send back. I would record straight through in response to the track, and then he would chop it up or take parts and use what he wanted. And so it was like, I think we both work that way, where we just sort of do this like rough draft and then start working with that.
And that's part of the fun too, When I'm writing songs, I'm definitely trying to stick to a pop song structure. I'm doing a verse, chorus, some sort of middle, first chorus, double chorus, some sort of ending. Or are you just letting the song dictate where it goes. Like obviously with Crushing, I'm pretty sure it's just let's just see where this goes. And it doesn't really matter. It's not like you're trying to be a pop thing. But for one of your other bands, is that something you keep in mind?
No, it's just organic.
Yeah.
It's just, it goes where it goes. The more I try to think about how to make it work, the harder it is to make the song. Then the song takes a year to make. But if I don't think about it, it just naturally just gets recorded in the right way. It's once I start thinking about it, that's when I know it's like, well, I messed this up.
All right. Finally, she's gone. Okay, so as far as guitar pedals, equipment, all that stuff, nowadays there's a bunch of boutique pedals that are coming out the last couple of years where they're definitely aware of shoegaze and stuff like that. They're making gear towards that stuff. Is that something you follow at all? Are you updating stuff? Are you still just using the same stuff you've been using for 25 years or whatever or more and just doing your thing?
Yeah, I guess I am interested in a lot of the boutique pedals. I mean, the best ones, I don't own any right now, but I'm going to get some just because I know the guys, are the Death by Audio pedals. There's a couple that I want to get my hands on. But yeah, I was always, I was just fine with the tiny little pedals I had accrued over the years or something. But I like stuff like that, like the Red Panda Particle, the Strymons, the Eventides, all that stuff. I'm a fan of it. I just don't have it. I just don't, because you got to drop some cash down for that sort of stuff.
So when you're recording your guitars, are you recording an amp and miking it? Or are you using virtual amps? Are you going direct? What's your setup? Even back then, that's what you were doing?
Yeah, it was all direct.
So were you going just straight out of the pedal, or were you using the DI box?
Straight out of the pedal. No air, just straight signal.
Are there any pieces of gear that you think are vital to your sound?
Yeah, just looping pedals. The looping pedal. And a good reverb.
Are you just playing stuff into it and finding something that loops that interests you, and then you mess around with it?
Yeah, I mean, it's when it first came out, I just thought of it as Lovesliescrushing Crushing in a box, because if I'd had that thing back in '95, we would have been doing tons of shows, more shows than we did, because it was right there. You could do all this stuff live. Nope, yeah, that's the most crucial piece of gear.
But I'm making a Spotify playlist called Among the Clouds, where I'm asking everybody to pick a song that they feel doesn't have to be your favorite shoegaze, dream pop, whatever song, but if you were going to show somebody, like, they've never heard it before, like this is the song you would show them. And then what is your favorite song that you've done?
I would show people Cocteau Twins' Pink, Orange, Red. I would show them that song if I wanted to let them know what stuff can sound like. And of our songs, it would either be Blooded and Blossom Blown or Valerian. Either of those two, either one, or Baby's Breath. But I feel like Valerian, because aesthetically how simple it is, and because it's our first song that we ever made, and Blooded and Blossom just seems to aesthetically just be the most perfect of anything that we did at that time. So that would be those two.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like Baby's Breath is kind of like the big one. That's
people really like Baby's Breath.
Is there a song where it did blow up and you're like, I totally didn't see that coming? Like, you know what I mean? Where it became a fan favorite and you're like, wow, I didn't even think it was that amazing when I was writing it.
Radio Friendly. Astrobrite Radio Friendly. Yeah, that one. Mm-hmm. Well, it's the most poppy, I think. It's the most traditional. So I can see why people like that one a lot. Yeah, I guess I'm always shocked by the songs that people do like when I meet them. And they mentioned like Lemon Lime or something like that. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Thanks, guys, for doing the show. I appreciate it. And I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. As somebody who has followed you guys for, I don't know, when I was 17 and now I'm 44. It's fun. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great talking to you. It was fun. Good conversation.
I'd like to thank Scott and Melissa for taking the time to talk to me today. It's always really cool when you get to talk to musicians that you've listened to for over half your life, and they end up being really cool people as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.